Thank you for tuning in to the World Builder's Anvil, episode 320. Digging Your World for Details, Part 2, in shocking 2D.
Don't know where to start building your fantasy world?
Do you need more? Does it make sense?
Forget any worries and become a crafter of imagination.
This is the place where we will prime your mind.
Now, it's time to heat up the forge.
Break out the mithril ingots and hammer.
Welcome to the World Builder's Anvil. I'm Jeffrey W. Ingram.
And I'm Michael Miller.
Let's sup from the muck of Java and build. Welcome back. My name is Don Metcalf.
And I am Jonathan Metcalf.
Like I said, at some point you have to kind of follow tropes because people understand them and they can follow your story. But if you always follow them, you just become predictable. So it's like, how do you find that line? Who knows?
Has a line about that where you should just write out. I forget if it was 7 or 11. That your first idea isn't the right one to do. And by the time you get to 7 or 11, I forget the number, so forgive me that. When you get there, you are really pushing it. You're pushing your brain to come up with something that maybe you hadn't thought of before, and then that's probably where your better ideas are.
And I'll make my plug here for live role-playing games or at a table. That's where that's brilliant because
tabletop, yeah.
The players never follow what is expected. Well, not never.
Yeah. And I'll always say too, if you ever want to learn to become a storyteller, you get stuck in stories. If you have people at the table who are throwing wrenches at you while you're trying, you learn fast.
Well, also people will come up with ideas that you would have never come up with. And I think I can say, even at our table, right? Yeah. Some of the most iconic moments were completely unexpected. Or things that came out of left field and that somebody said a quote and just the entire...
It was an iconic moment. You're right.
Yeah.
And typically when you think back to those great games, it's those moments you're remembering, not, I remember the city of Iowa. It was so awesome. And that street, 5th Street. Yeah, that was a great... No one remembers 5th Street.
Yeah. You don't remember the set pieces. You remember those brilliant moments where you're like, oh my gosh, this was so ridiculous.
Yeah. Another moment I want to get into here is I Am Spartacus. Now, this is a movie, these old classic Roman movies where they set up some like tropes that are true today. If you want to represent empire, you give it an English accent. If you want to represent freedom, you have a wiry, annoying American who's gonna cause trouble and probably violence.
Or a blue-faced man running, screaming.
Who's lived in America too long. But yeah. But it's like that moment was an ultimate moment of standing up against you've lost, but it's like, you know what? I'd rather die on my feet moment, which obviously they all admitted to when they stood up and said, I am Spartacus. Then one after another, you have a person standing up going, I am Spartacus. And it's a great moment, one, to show their bond and love for this guy in the face of you're saying to this Brutus, it's kind of an ironic mental faux pas there, but to Crassus, they're literally saying, kill us, because he's not a character. He's shown himself to be not a character that you trifle with, and he's going to kill you. You're probably going to die instead of going back into slavery at this moment. And they're all choosing that moment to go, you know what? I'd rather die. But it was so powerful, and it's been made fun of. It's been parodied, which is usually a moment that proves that you've had a great moment in your movie. When 20 people make fun of it in different movies going forward, or they do callbacks to it, that makes that moment iconic, and that's really one of them. And it's it's about his character of Spartacus and all of the characters who you saw, rise up with him in rebellion. So
you've got some other really good ones on here, ones that we don't necessarily have a full-blown conversation about, but definitely worth mentioning. In When Harry Met Sally, I'll have what she's having.
Yes. Great
movie, tons of fantastic quotable lines.
I enjoyed it. Yeah,
fantastic movie, and that obviously the orgasm scene in the diner is the most memorable. Yeah. But the fact that line,
it was the punchline at the end.
It was the punchline, and I'm sure you're aware, but that was the director's mother. That was Rob Reiner's mother.
Oh, really?
Yes, and he's talking to Meg Ryan about it, and he's like trying to tell her, like, look, you really got to get into this. And he then got into it and did a fake orgasm, and he's was very self-conscious about it because his mother's sitting right there. And he's like, I just had an orgasm in front of my mother.
Yeah, that's right. If I could do this, you could do this. Yeah.
Basically. And his mother, to his mother's credit, I didn't know if she was an actress beyond that movie. I'm not familiar with her career, but her delivery was excellent.
That could have been B. Arthur delivering that line.
Yeah.
I mean,
it was excellent.
Yeah, no. That was definitely one of those moments too. And it's like that, the orgasm moment itself is really close, if not an iconic moment, but the punchline at the end just really ensured that was going to be the iconic moment. I don't really remember the movie. It was a nice romantic comedy that I enjoyed, but that scene I remember, and that punchline I remember, the old lady making that point. It's like, where's the beef lady? I remember that forever.
John, you want to pick one here?
Oh, actually, I wanted to ask a question. So,
Sure.
As we're doing this listening, I'm the only one here who I think doesn't regularly write fiction, and I'm wondering, like, what makes a moment iconic? Is it something that defines the character? Is it something that defies expectation? What do all these things have in common that if we were trying to create one in our fiction, like, what would we be looking for? I mean, I guess some of it you just sort of happens accidentally.
Yeah.
But sure, if we were trying to write something that was relevant and, like, hey, here's a critical moment in a scene for this character, what would I be looking for?
I think in a way you kind of just described it. It's that moment where you either completely reaffirm that Superman is Superman, that moment where he catches the airplane and is holding it over his head, becomes an iconic scene because you're reinforcing that this is here, it is unmovable, this is the way we're going. Or it's the moment where you completely zag in the wrong direction. I think it has to be, but once again, I'm not, because it happens accidentally too. So sometimes it's just, it catches on, at a subconscious level from the writer to the people. But usually I think it's either where you're saying, this is who we are, this is what we mean, or about a character or the whole story or some facet. But yeah, I think it's those two things that sort of end up bringing out iconic moments, because it has to offer more than just a memorable moment, or else it is just where's the beef. I can remember that forever, but it's not iconic in storytelling. But it takes the story and it fastens in your head what the story is going to be, whether if it is a zig or a zag.
Go ahead, John.
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, for me, all of what you just said, but it can also be almost the opposite of the same on the same moment. It can be something that really reaffirms the character and solidifies who they are, whether that's really been established or whether this is the establishing moment. But it can also be when the character evolves and changes into something new. Sometimes you have the character, they're like, maybe you have a character that's very meek, like you have a Journey's Hero story, and you have a character that's very meek and hasn't come into their own, and then they finally, Spider-Man. Peter Parker finally becoming Spider-Man, something like that, where a character finally, like, takes it on. He was like, okay, well, I've got these powers, but I'm going to use them for myself, and I'm going to step back. I don't need to help somebody else. But then Uncle Ben dies, and he's like, I owe the world my everything. I have to be the people's hero. I have to protect people just because I'm able to. I have to. And that's something that's bigger than what he was prior to that moment. So you can have moments like that, or it could also be something that's just literally something that's moving the story along. I'm trying to think of, like, a good example of that where.
Well, here's one that will reinforce what you're saying.
Okay.
Suikoden 2, two best friends. One's going to be the hero. One's going to be the antagonist. A very uncommon thing that you see, but it was at the moment where the best friend decides that his path is taking him down on the forces of evil, essentially. Now he's doing it for good reasons. But, the thing is, it's those moments, where, you either zig or zag in a story that have the potential. Now, most will be forgotten. And so the thing is, if you make those moments available, and you catch people in the right way, it's when the big sort of jerky guy takes the bullet for the team. And no one would have expected it the whole time, but just did it being selfless. That could be one of those moments. But I think the tough thing is you have to remember, most of your attempts are probably going to fail.
And the funny thing is, when it comes to movies, a lot of the ones that we gravitate towards in movies were not planned. And some of them people didn't think were going to be a big deal. Like my biggest thing is Jaws. The line, everyone that knows Jaws, like, what do you think of when you think of Jaws? You're going to need a bigger boat. That's the line that comes to mind when you talk about Jaws. And that was an improv line by Roy Scheider. He came up with that line that was not in the script. And they were like, that's great. Because when they first showed him the shark coming out of the water, like, you look at his reaction, it's very genuine. I don't know that he expected it to be the way it was. Like, I don't know that was all him acting. I that's something that feels familiar to me, because I have watched, it's been a long time, but I have watched like all the makings of that movie, documentaries on it, and I have like 5 different versions of the movie. So big fan. But that's a moment where you could have been like, okay, well, that's just a fun line they threw in, and when they made the movie, they were like, okay, that's a great line. We're like, cool, we'll leave it in. But now here we are later, and the movie becomes a phenomenon, and that's, when they marketed the movie, of course, the marketing was all, don't go back in the water. You'll be afraid to go in the water. What was it? I'm trying to remember the
I don't remember the exact thing, but yeah,
it was something like that. Like, and they made an entire generation of people scared of the beach, but everyone remembers you're going to need a bigger boat.
That's very good. Do you have something else about this too, John?
No, I was just listening. I mean, I'm kind of a big picture guy in some ways, so it sounds to me like when you have those moments that either define a character, either reaffirming what the audience knows is just sort of representational of the character, or when you have one of those moments where you come across a new aspect of a character, or it's transformational, representational, are the two kind of things you just described. And I think I was contemplating, as you're talking about, well, how does the Harry Met Sally thing work with that? But actually, in that case, I think it's not about the characters on screen. I think it's actually the audience. It's actually representing what the audience is feeling, because like here you are, you're in this uncomfortable moment. Like back then, having someone have an orgasm on screen, because not everyone had, nobody had internet porn, right? Like we just really didn't see that. Right?
I love how on the shirt tails of that word, your wife returns to the room.
Yeah. Welcome back.
We're talking about internet porn. John has subverted us so far from this subject.
But in that moment, as the audience, it was like really uncomfortable, and I may have posted this number as the virus hotline, and that'd be the worst prank ever.
That would be the worst prank ever. Yes.
You'd also be getting lots of phone calls.
Anyway. So I think, the audience is sitting there going like, oh my gosh, that's hilarious and fun. And that looks great. But I'm supposed to be awkward. And then like having that person say that, I think made an iconic moment, because it reflected what the viewer, the reader, felt so perfectly in a funny way. So the question I asked a minute ago, and these fine gentlemen answered so brilliantly, and then I came up with my internet porn thing, was so if you're trying to craft, one of these moments, like what are you looking for when you have one of these iconic moments? Like, what is it, if I were writing a scene, what do you think are the ingredients that make it ultimately become iconic? And some of it's by accident, by chance, we get that, but
yeah, but I think that a lot of it, because the funny thing is, I know that we were supposed to be talking about worlds and cultures and things like that, but what we've been really talking about are people within that world and culture, and that what you're doing is showing it off because of the character that you dropped in.
It can be like something that shows off the culture more. Like, to me, most of the stuff that they make prop wise in Lord of the Rings, the movies, with the level of detail. But I mean, ultimately, most of the moments are really about the characters, which people tend to forget are the most important part of your world building anyway. But yeah. But
that's how you show off your world. Your world doesn't. Yeah. You just don't make a world and then it sits there and you go, oh, that's called miniatura and doll houses. Oh, that's very pretty. But the way that you're showing off your world is through the eyes of a person. And so I think those iconic moments happen because you want to show how the character is reacting to something. You want to show something about them, and you're answering the question that the reader or the player or the person, the viewer who's experiencing this world, what would I do in this situation if I was dropped into this Unreal Universe, whatever, what would I do? Like, what would I do at this
and
moment?
they can either identify it in a, yes, I would do that, or, oh my God, that's horrible.
Or that is a bad idea, very bad idea. And then the consequences that come out of those decisions as dictated by your universe, like how we started with the monkey idol and trying to put sand on it and whatever. Well, what happens when that doesn't work? Well, the giant trap is triggered. And what does that look like? Well, now what do? You run. Things like that. So those iconic moments are
run.
Go. Asps, very dangerous. You go first.
You go first.
Yes. It's those moments where you're just like, okay, so what is it that we're showing off? What is it? As a writer, one of the things that we always say is you have to know what your character wants, you have to know what your character needs, and you have to know what your character fears. And whatever that fear thing is, make sure you do it to them. Because what everybody thinks is, if this happens to me, I will die, or like the world will open up, a pit will open up and I'll fall into it and it's just over. And of course, it's not what happens. So you have to see what actually happens.
I want to tag up on something you just said, because this is something that I actually purposefully do with characters, and Batman is a great example of it. It's one thing to say, okay, well, your character's afraid of X, Y, and Z, and they live a lifestyle that never really puts them in front of X, Y, and Z. So Batman makes a commitment. And for me, it's more about commitments than fears. So Batman makes a commitment that he's never going to use guns. And I could make that commitment. Not hard for me to avoid that one. My lifestyle doesn't put me in a circumstance where I need to choose whether or not I'm going to use a gun on a person or not. Batman puts himself in that situation all the time. Indiana Jones, snakes, afraid of snakes, constantly running into snakes. So we constantly get to see that. So when, like for tabletop, we were talking about tabletop earlier, like if I make a character, I try to create contradiction in the character, whether that is a contradiction of his character versus his commitment, or his fear versus lifestyle. Like I try to put those things built in there. So there's a constant overlapping between things that are contradictory that make tension for the character, or difficulty for the character, or pain. So.
And talk about this too, it kind of reminds me, and kind of going to what John said about, it's like, sometimes it's like, you're breaking down the wall with the audience, and you're communicating with them is what you're really attempting in these scenes, more so than just a quick conversation sometimes. And I think that this movie, I don't even know the name of the movie. I think it was like Lambier and Mario Van Peebles, and I think Dennis Leary was the bad guy in the movie. I know that.
Devil's Night.
Maybe. No. This was like out in the wilderness somewhere. And
what characters did you say again?
Mario Van Peebles.
Oh,
I think
no.
It was Lambier, and Dennis Leary was the bad guy, or maybe even like the friend of the bad guy. He was like working with the bad guy. Maybe not the.
And they were out in the woods.
It was like they were on a boat. And in the woods, this was a bad movie. It was like called Gun or something like that.
Okay.
There was a couple iconic scenes in that movie. One was the two guys hate each other. Like one's, I think, a good guy, one's a bad guy, but they're forced to work together. Uncommon trope. But there's a moment in the movie where he like throws a first aid kit to the guy, and the guy's like, "What's this for?" And then he shoots him in the leg. And he's like, "I want to make sure the gun still worked." And then later on, like the first aid kit gets thrown back, and the guy shoots him in the leg, and, but you saw it coming. But the best part was at the very end, this is at the height of Dennis Leary's comedy, where it's sort of his rant comedy phase. And they're sitting there, and he was playing an excellent bad guy the whole movie. It was probably the best part of the movie. And at the very end, they sit there and they put a bomb on the boat, and they had just escaped the boat. And he opens up the room because he's looking for them, and he sees the bomb going 3, 2, and like it cuts off them just going, fuck me. And and essentially the boat blows up, and he's dead or whatever. But like that one moment for me was really iconic in a horrible movie. But it was like you're trying to break down the wall, and you're really trying to communicate with the audience, but you're taking something that they know about him as a person, you're cheating, right? And you're saying, let's take that moment and try and connect the audience to the movie, and it worked for me because I liked that movie. I watched it a couple times because of that one moment.
Well, that's one
and the gun shooting.
I like that reminds me of Die Hard, right? And there's so many iconic moments in Die Hard. I mean, really, it's whether you believe it's a Christmas movie or not, it's a great one. And that idea of his character and the moment of hearing, like seeing somebody stomp off, and the wife's like, "Oh, he's alive," because no one else could piss somebody off like that. It's like you get the ongoing humor of this horrific situation, and up against the wall, what are you going to do? And you go outside the norm boundaries of of what's possible because you only have a certain amount of material open to you. And yet you have the character running that way the whole way. And when you have iconic lines like, yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker, as he's flying, like these are the moments, and that they fit, that that they, the world, circumstance, the character, it's like, perfect moment that we all hold on to because, we're all, you can't see, but we're all nodding and smiling. And that's the moment that you want. A whole bunch of people nodding and smiling.
Yeah, that yippee-ki-yay thing sort of perfectly encapsulates this, Yankee cowboy. And so it does sort of become that representational moment. There's another one this one's also kind of obscure, like Jeff's. There was this cop show in the 70s called Cannon, and it was played by this overweight actor, and it was sort of moderately popular.
Do you have like a little weird, crappy beard kind of thing?
I don't remember.
I don't know.
The show, honestly, which is my point, because I remember one thing that defined the character. Because like every other cop in that era of cop shows was like in great shape, and they chase down the bad guy, and they're running through the streets and knocking over carts. But this guy was clearly out of shape. It was just like, how is this going to work, right? And that's the question you're kind of asking. Like, this cop is like, whoa, this isn't happening. This is not going to be the fight scene cop, and he's not really the pure detective brain cop either. So the one scene that represented that whole show to me, and it's pretty much the only thing I remember after having watched hundreds of, or I don't know, a lot of episodes, was this bad guy starts to run away, and our cop chases him like 10 steps, and then draws his 6-shooter, says freeze. You're like, well, is that going to work? And so the guy is running across the street away from our bad guy, away from our hero, who clearly could never catch him. The guy freezes and turns around, and then boom, gets hit by a bus. And it was so unexpected and so perfect, and represents the character perfectly. Like, there was no way he was going to catch him, and it was also unexpected. So for me, that was the whole show right there in that moment.
How about Monk?
Yeah, great example.
Well, but this is a character, right? Monk. And the thing that makes him interesting is that he's OCD and has lots of germophobia and has these compulsive behaviors. How are you going to be able to function in the world, let alone do your job as in
a very gruesome type of work? Yes.
Yeah, and so almost any episode you see him and he has to search through garbage, or it's a hoarder's house, or everything.
It's like they were very good to design those moments to play into him. Yeah.
Right, we're gonna chase after the guy and touch every single what was it, the parking meters, right, as he went, and he had to count.
USA actually had some very good shows in that era. I'm very disappointed. I don't know if they're doing that good anymore. Like Burn Notice was there.
Burn Notice,
Psych, some great shows back then.
Also, there's a lot of great there are some because I love cartoons. I love cartoons. And I love animation. Me too. I love claymation. Megamind, I think, is one of the most perfect.
I love that movie.
I mean, it is beat for beat. It is like a perfect story, and knowing about the character, and I mean, you're bringing in like aliens, and you're bringing in tropes from Superman and all. You're playing around with all this, but like that this character is like, well, I would have been good. I could have been that way, but you know what? No one was going to buy it, and therefore, if I'm going to be the baddest, I'm going to be the baddest there is. You already knew that there was this want not to be that trope, but he was going to play it up all the way, and so you're following him the entire time. Even the setup, the beginning is like, well, he's falling to his death. He's like, okay, that was probably a bad choice. How did I get here? And so you're already set up with that you want to be on this guy's side, even though he's the bad guy, sort of like Despicable Me, where you're like, you have the anti-hero to play with. And so then you find out about the universe through these characters that have these bizarre, moments that get to be played up because of the world that they're in. If you're going to be superheroes and supervillains, how big does this go? And it gets really big.
And in a way, it keeps reinforcing its own world through a reoccurring idea, but it works and builds and makes itself better probably most of the time, I would assume.
And beloved characters that we want to visit again. We want to see it again.
Well, in a weird way, that reminds me of one that I actually have written down, which is just 3 words.
Wait. I'm totally interrupting because I have a small one to stick in. Let's end with that one. But I'm reminded of a movie called El Diablo, which is a fun little Western movie with Louis Gossett Jr. And there's a great moment in it where it really establishes the characters. You don't know what's up yet. You're just like, okay, this is a Western, and this guy's a writer, and there's obviously a an outlaw, a Western outlaw. And so what is this writer going to do? And he's just trying to meet real cowboys and write stories. And so he's going to start writing about this guy right here. And this other dude comes up and he's like, hey, and he kind of calls him out, and the guy's walking away, and he just shoots him in the back. Real big no-no in the Western stories and Western movies. It happens, but it's usually very poignantly done. So the writer says to Louis Agassiz Jr., who's the one who shot the guy, he's like, "You just shot that man in the back," and he very, very matter-of-factly says, "Well, his back was to me."
Yeah,
and that totally sets the tone for that character and the movie, and they revisit that moment later in the movie. So that's all I got. Let's end on what you got.
Very good. Now I wanted to slip in As You Wish. 3 words that the thing I loved about this one was you could tell this one was set up, because the line in The Princess's Bride, I don't know how many times it was in there, several times. But and then the iconic moment, though, is at the end where she realizes it's her farm boy, and he says it in a very loving way to her, "As you wish." But that becomes an iconic moment, but it gets built up, and that one to me is obviously it's planned, and it worked for me. I'm a sucker for love stories. So what can I say?
See, well, and also went in from the story into the end of the movie where the grandfather says it to his grandson.
Yeah,
I see. For me, it's always about him falling down the hill.
Right.
Because he's "as you," and then she's like, "Oh no, Wesley," and she realizes what's happening.
I always thought, how cool is it to have a grandfather who's Columbo? I mean, come on.
I saw the same thing. I love that. Love that show.
A very reluctant Fred Savage.
And I'll just quickly tap on here the one I've written down, which I've been avoiding, which is "I Am Your Father." Which, for most science fiction fantasy people, that is probably the most iconic line ever in fiction, to the point where literally I think it was my friend Nate and my friend Dave all showed up to my house when my nephew was like 2. He's running around in my dad's motorcycle helmet, strapped on, and a diaper. That's it. Motorcycle helmet, diaper, 2-year-old.
Are you trying to make that sound odd? That's usually how I walk around the house.
Yeah, well, it's okay when you're 2. He comes running in, which he always did being a 2-year-old, and he stops, which was lucky because he had the helmet on. I was afraid he was going to hit me in the groin, speaking of Elmo. And he comes running around and stops and goes, "Lulu," which is what they call me, Uncle Lulu. "I am your father." And of course, oh my God, me and my friends lose our minds, which if have ever been a parent of a toddler, you realize what a big mistake that actually usually is to do. But it was to me, that became an even more iconic moment because of that. And of course, then for the next 2 hours straight, he was following us around just saying, "I'm your father, I'm your father, I'm your father." But
that was a moment that created a trope. An iconic trope that went through generations, and for those of us who watched it in the theater, gasping. You don't realize it now because it's so overdone and so used, but for us, it was brand new. Yeah. It was a shock and a half.
Yeah, especially it's like the guy you hate as the person, and the first movie had made it iconic. Empire Strikes Back was iconic before it released, and for those of you old enough to remember, but my back hurts.
Has everyone seen the newest one? I finally saw it.
I've not seen it yet.
You have to go see it, Jeff.
Yeah,
because now we can't. Now we have to have the Metcalfs on again so we can all talk about it after you've watched it.
Okay.
John and I are two different minds of this whole thing. Oh my God. Yeah, I'm a release order babe. I wanted the original 3 and don't rework them.
No changes.
No changes. It's like the Matrix. It's like a Highlander. There is only one.
Yeah.
There are no other movies.
There should have been only one.
I know that second movie was so
Matrix
good.
Just one. Star Wars. I liked my 3. I was good.
Yeah.
I was looking forward to it when it was happening, when we were looking forward to all of them being finished, and what's happened. Yeah, that's a whole different show.
Yeah, that
we
might
have
be
to
a
talk
mini
about
series.
this.
Yeah.
But
We actually
probably
sit
have
down
a
again.
podcast talking about Star Wars. What happened?
It is like 80s bands getting back together a little bit. It's like not quite the same, but like you do love it, right?
Yeah, and I kind of agree. I don't think Star Wars became so iconic by the time the final trilogy came out. It would have been very hard, no matter how you, and we can argue about how good it is, and people have different beliefs in that. The correct ones agree with me, of course, but that's the way geeks work, right? And but it's like
there are many opinions. Who am I to say?
You could not wrap up the Skywalker saga and not be hated by people. You just can't do it. I mean, people have their own minds and stories set to it at this point.
I completely disagree with you. I think if they had just let JJ do all three, we'd all be happy with it.
You might be happier with it, but there still would have been a core of people who hated it and were mad forever.
And those people are the people that are going to be mad and too picky.
No, because if you had done it a different way, they would have been happy, and there would be another core of people who'd be mad. I say it's so big at the point where the trilogy came out that there was no way
impossible to
everyone who wanted
appease everyone.
Thing. Yeah. But like I said, that's a whole possible just podcast on its own, let alone a new episode.
I could go into the Trek one. I think Trek was the best reboot that we've gotten.
That was I liked the reboot of Star Trek.
That is a whole different story. But okay, now we're gonna go in. We're gonna make this episode 319 and 320. But looking at the times of it, maybe 321 as well. I'll figure that out when I cut it apart. But I want to thank Don and John for helping us here. Now we're gonna do our world building task. Do you want to read it, Michael? This one has to be specific. So.
Sure. Make a story with your family or friends online, and it says descriptors or online roll 20.
Yeah. So essentially, there's a game. Our friend, actually, all of our friend Matthew Bannock and his cousin Tim Bannock finally put together in a PDF called Descriptors. It's an adjective-based narratives, very easy to play game. So if you're being a good person, you're staying home, and you're not going out unless you need to do something, take some time with your family at home and like grab this very simple, like I think it's a couple page PDF game that you can download and play a game and create stories with your family and make those iconic moments at your table, your family table.
And I'm going to give you a little task, Jeff, if you feel like doing it, but I'm not going to hold you to it. We actually did an episode where we used descriptors on the show. So if you want to go back and listen to that episode, give yourself an idea of what it's like to use. Right? Were all the Wine Steward used descriptors?
I forget which one it was. That might have been GURPS Lite too. I don't remember. I'll try and find it and link it to this episode. We've had over 300 people. In my mind, I'm old. Okay. And the other one too is, and if you have friends separated and you don't want to get together, maybe someone's actually presenting symptoms instead of getting together. There's something online called Roll20. They sent out an email talking about they're giving away some additional free stuff because of the coronavirus to give people a chance to play tabletop style role-playing games together online.
From the safety of your own home.
From the safety of your own home. So if you can't get together because of the disease and you want to get together with friends, there's one option, and both are creative outlets you can have lots and lots of fun with. Going back to John's statement, we're all huge fans of playing games together because it's not just the stories, it's the community you get to build with the people you play with. So if you're sick of your family, play a game with them. It'll be more fun. And
the real world task?
Go to flatteningthecurve.com and learn how to flatten the curve. But yeah, no, really, it's like Michael said, I don't think you need to be panicked. I've had what they call NBC training. And I'm not super panicked, but I'm not going to the store if I don't need to. I can order enough stuff delivered. And I've had a respiratory issue on top of it. So that makes even a little bit more sense. Who knows? They'll never test me. I'm not sick enough. So but the thing is, let this thing take its time, because the reason you want to flatten the curve is, and here's the idea is, there's a certain number of beds of sick people you can handle. And if you spike too quickly in the number of people sick, then you have not enough beds in hospitals to take care of them. So
and also more noteworthy, you don't have enough hospital beds and spaces to take care of people that are not sick, that just got hit by a car or had a heart attack. So like, we need to make sure that our healthcare system can handle the volume. That's what it's about. It's not just about keeping you safe. It's about keeping all of your friends, family, neighbors, and countrymen safe.
So take care of your family, friends, everyone in the world, all of humanity. I love them all. I love you here today, especially if you disagree with me, because I'm weird. Hope you all have a wonderful day, and we'll speak to you next time.
Happy St. Patrick's Day, and beware of the Ides of March.
Oh! Thank you so much for listening to the World Builders Anvil.
We would love it if you would share the World Builders Anvil with 2 of your friends.
And so would they.
If they are unfamiliar with podcasts, then you get to introduce them to the wonderful world of podcasting.
Take them to Stitcher or iTunes, or best of all, just send them to our website, www.gardul.com.
That's GARDUL.com.
Now strike while the mithril's hot.